In the last video, we went over a basic template that you can use when creating our visuals in Power BI. In this video, we'll go over how you can make additional transformations to your data set after the data set has been passed to R from Power BI. You will often find this particular feature necessary when your visual needs certain transformations that are not possible to do using native functionality within Power BI. So to show you why we're doing that in this particular visual, let's open up the visual that we're ultimately creating in this example. You will see that in the visual that we're creating for this example, there are certain properties that the data set will need to have in order to be able to create this visual. One of the properties that the data set will need to have is that we will need to tell ggplot what country to color differently than the other countries. In this particular case, we need to be able to tell ggplot that we want to color code the country that spent a greater percentage of their government expenditures on education a different color than the other countries that's individual. That's one thing that we need to do. Another thing that we need to do in this data set that we pass to that we're going to use for the basis of our visual is that we need to be able to provide some sort of a sorting order so that the visual know to place the country that spent the greatest percent of their expenditures on education at the top position, and the country that spent the least amount of their expenditures on education at the bottom position. Now that you know what the end goal is, let's execute this code so we can first see what that data set looks like, and then we'll back in to how we created that data set. So we can execute this entire script by highlighting the code that we want to execute and clicking on the Control Enter. Doing so will execute the entire script, and you'll see that a plot wasn't generated, and that is because our data validation test passed, in which there was only 1 year in our data set, and also the column name test passed. So this code from line 37 down to line 44 was executed. If we want to see what the data frame that was produced looked like, we can go over to our console, and I can expand this out to increase the real estate for our console. And we can type the capital V and then spell out view, and we can pass to that particular function the plot data frame. Doing so will give us a nice pretty printout of what that data frame looks like. This is the data frame that will be the basis for our visual. Let's go over how to create this data frame. So you saw what the data frame looks like. Let's focus on the code between line 37 and 44. If we focus on that code, you will see that we start off on line 37 with the name of the data set or data frame that we ultimately want for our visual. And the name of that data frame is plot data. And then you see this particular operator here, which is called an assignment operator. What the assignment operator means is it will take the results of the subsequent code and assign it to the variable that you're specifying with the assignment operator. So in this particular case, the results of the code block from 38 to 44, which is one code block, that result will be assigned to a variable named plot data. Okay, so let's go step by step through each piece of this code. The first thing that happens in this chain of events in this particular code snippet is that the data set data frame is used as the basis of this particular workflow. So you'll see that we start with the data set data frame, and then we use this operator here, which is the pipe operator, which is made of a percent sign, a greater than sign, and then another percent sign. What this pipe operator does is it takes the result of this expression and passes it as the first argument in the next set of expressions in that particular workflow. So in this particular case, what is happening is this dataset data frame is passed as the first argument in this mutate function, which starts at line 39. Because that data frame is passed as the first argument to the mutate function, we don't have to explicitly define it. If we were using the mutate function by itself, we would need to explicitly define the data frame that we're using. So you'll see that after that has occurred, the next step in the workflow is that the mutate verb or function in dplyr is used to project new data to the dataset data frame. In this particular situation, the new data that's being added to it are 3 columns. One is the rank column, 2 the country column, and the country column is not necessarily, it's not added, but the data type of that particular column is changed. And then the second column that's added is a call out column, and that would be a column that we would use to be able to make it easy for ggplot to know which country to color code and which country not to color code. So let's go over how each of these particular columns or variables, as they're referred to in R, are created. And we'll start off with the rank variable. The disrank function is a window function that is used to rank the total spent percent column in descending order. Now this disrank function is similar to you all that are used to using window functions in T-SQL. The disrank function that you use in T-SQL, which ranks based off of a particular column of data, and just like the disrank function in T-SQL, if there are ties in the data set, then the ranking right after the tie will keep the numerical order. What I mean by that, say there's a tie in the second place position where there are 2 people or 2 countries in this case that had the same percentage spent on their educational expenditures, then you have a situation where you have a 1 for the first place country, and then you have a 2 for each of the countries that tied. So in that case, you would have 2 2s. You have a 1, 2, 2, and then the country that's in the 4th position will have a 3, because they're, based off of the output from the total expenditures, they're in the 3rd place. So that's what, so the same effect that this rank has when you're using window functions in T-SQL is the same effect that it has when you're using it within R via the dplyr package. The next column or variable that we'll go over is the country column. The country column, what we're doing with that particular column is we are going to change the data type of that particular column, and we're also going to change some properties about that particular column. Now, as I go through the course, you'll often notice when I'm referring to a column in a data set, I will sometimes use column. Now, also in other instances, use variable. Column and variables, they're one of the same thing. Statisticians typically refer to columns of data in a data set as a variable. So I go back and forth with how I refer to columns when I'm talking about a data set. Now let's go back over to this country column. The country column, what we're doing in this particular example is we're changing the data type to a factor. A factor data type in R is a data type that you can think of that you give to data that you're normally grouped by on, or data that represents a categorical data. In this particular instance, the categorical data in question is the country column. So what we're doing with the fact underscore reorder function is we're again converting the country into a factor data type, but in addition to that, we're telling R that when you sort that particular column, do not sort it based off of alphabetical order, sort it based off of the rank column. And there is a mistake that I have in my code right here, and that is this: the DS, the descendant property should be true, because what we want is we want it to be stored on the rank field, but we want it to be based off of descendant order. The second thing, or the last column that we want to add, is the callout column. This callout column we will use in the data visual to tell R which column or which country we want to highlight a different color from the other countries in the data set. So to execute that, we can highlight the code from 37 down to 43 before the pipe operator. If we do that, if we go over to our console and type view and the name of the data frame that we want to view, which is plot data, you'll see what that data frame looks like. So you'll see that it has every country that's in the data set, which is a total of 119 countries that were evaluated, and it has a rank column that was created that ranks the country based off of the total expenditure percent. And then we also have this call out column with only one column in this particular data set having the value of true. And that column would be the column that is the country that had the highest expenditures. Every other country will have a false, as you see in this data frame. But in our visual, we don't want to visualize all 119 countries. We just want to visualize the top 7. And we can easily do that by going back over to our code, and we can use the filter function or verb that is often referred to in the dplyr community, which that function comes from. We can say that we only want to return a data set that includes countries that are ranked number 1 down to number 7. So if we execute the code from line the complete code snippet from line 37 down to 44, and if we go over to our console, and if we print this out or view it via the view function, you'll see the data set that we have. And you'll see that we have a data set that has the attributes that we added to it. One would be the rank column was added to it, and as we said before, it ranks the data set or each row in the data set based off of the value and the total expenditure percent. Then the second thing that we added was the call out column, and this column would tell R which country we want to highlight, which country we want to color differently. In this case, you see Zimbabwe had a expenditure on education that was roughly 29%, which is the biggest number in the total expenditure percent column. So that is why it is ranked number 1, and that is also why true was assigned to it for the call out. Now, the last thing I want to point out is that I said earlier that there are some properties that we have in this particular data set that are not evident when you look at it. And that property being is the sort order of the country. We can see that in action if we explicitly tell R to sort the country column. So we can do that by using the arrange function. And we can do this off in the console. So let's give us a little bit more room in the console. And I will type arrange, which is a function like order by in SQL that you can use to order data in a data set. And the data set that I want to order is a plot data set or data frame. And I want to order it based off of the country field. So I'll type country. Excuse me, I had a little tab completion that I didn't want. So country, spell that out. And then when I do that, you'll see that when we order it, you'll see that Belize is in the first position, because if we look at it, we base that order. We go back to our code. We told it that we want to order it with the descend property equal to true. So given that, it will order the 7th ranked country first, the 6th ranked country second, so on and so forth. And the reason why it's ordered this way, for some real reason, when you have a bar chart, and this particular property exists in Microsoft Excel as well. It may be a good reason for it, but I don't know what that reason is. But when you create a data set for a bar chart, a horizontal bar chart, and you want the greatest value to be in the first position, and the least, and the element that has the smallest value in the last position, for some reason you need to have the data sorted in descending order, sorted in ascending order like we have it here, so that when it displays, it will display with the greatest being number 1 and the least amount being number 2. So when I say ascending order, you'll see here that it's sorted in ascending order based off the total expenditure field, but descending order based off of the rank field. And by having the data sorted in this particular order, you'll see later on in a subsequent tutorial how this sort order will result in a horizontal bar chart with the country that has the greater expenditure, which in this case is Zimbabwe, being in the first position, and the country with the smallest expenditure on education in the last position, which in this case would be Belize.